Just start with questions.
First question is low bar versus high bar squats, and what is each best for?
Low bar versus high bar squats.
This is like the most.
So I think, from what I understand, low bar. I would not low bar unless you're powerlifting. There's no need. It's so much stress on your shoulders, and yeah, it's only like mechanically advantageous for a powerlifter, isn't it? And even then, I think most people just go straight to low bar in powerlifting when they might be a great high bar squatter. Eric Lillibridge was a high bar squatter for years before he tried low bar squatting, and he squatted a huge weights at we squatted huge weights at that with that technique. So I think it's entirely dependent on people's proportions and what their aim is, what their aim is, what they're training for. I think high bar should be the default most of the time, and then, like I say, low bar only if you can get into a good position to do low bar, and if you need to do it for powerlifting. I don't think there's maybe make an argument for using it with a rugby player, because of the position they're in scrummaging, and I think good morning should be employed more as well with rugby players. But yeah, that's what I reckon. Yeah,
I think personal preference also plays into it.
Yeah,
like because some people just prefer low bar to high bar. Like most people do prefer high bar just because it's easier on your joints usually.
Yeah.
But also, I feel like some people actually get deeper with low bar, just because you get more hip range of motion, and you're not limited by ankle range of motion as much.
Yeah.
So you can get more total range of motion that way.
Someone with
poor ankle range of motion.
Yeah, I think that can be more easily. So generally with a low bar position, someone will adopt a wider stance as well, and they'll toe out a little bit more, and that will, that will look as if they're able to reach depth, like you say, they're getting more hip flexion.
Yeah.
But if they were to just maintain a high bar position and widen their stance and toe out a bit more,
it'd be pretty much.
They're mitigating their ankle mobility issues, and they're able to just get into a deeper position on their squat. Because that's what you'll see with most people. Even if they do that, I mean, people with terrible ankle range, they'll terrible dorsiflexion, I should say. They squat down and they literally just run into their ankles and fall backwards, don't they? Yeah. That's what you'll see all the time. So what you generally do is try and get their stance as wide as reasonable, I think, and then get them toeing out just enough to mitigate that. I think anything up to maybe 30, 45 degrees, something like that. 45 degrees is getting excessive.
45 degrees is pretty.
Yeah, it's excessive, but like probably 30 degrees. Yeah. And then if they're still having issues, then obviously stick a pair of weightlifting shoes on them and work on their ankle range, and then you can still get them squatting well then, but you can still remedy the issue and occasionally try and maybe lower the heel height or have them try
shoes
after a few training cycles.
Or you can start them off with shoes and a plate underneath the heels.
Maybe,
plate.
Yeah. Like that Chinese weightlifter I just showed you.
Yeah. All right. Second question is, let's skip this one because this one is about the purpose of life. The third one is...
There is no purpose.
No?
There's no purpose to life. Do what you want to do.
Yeah. Strength standards on the big four for proportional/jacked physique.
Strength standards on what are the big four?
I'm assuming it's squat, bench, dead, and overhead press.
So I'd say my understanding would be... Well, what do you reckon? Because I just answered that last question.
It's a bit arbitrary. Like, there's no real standards for it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the more you can lift, the more jacked you'll be, pretty much, or the other way around, more so.
Yeah.
But I'd say on average, someone who can bench, say, in pounds, 315 for 5 or more reps, squat maybe 4 or 5 or more reps, deadlift maybe 500, 5 or more reps, and overhead press like maybe 185 to 200, 5 or more reps. Like that's a pretty good goal for most average people, I'd say, and you'd have a decent amount of muscle mass at that point. Like obviously it's pretty arbitrary, but I think most people can attain that, and it would give you some pretty good size.
Is the question? What's the question? Just strength, or is it
strength standards on the big four for proportional/jacked physique?
So they are looking to be. So I think that's something that will keep coming back to. Is you've got to, even though there's definite crossover, you've got to differentiate between training for size, training for strength. They're very different.
Yeah.
And strength is always very specific.
Yeah.
Whatever you're training for.
That's why I mentioned 5 or more reps.
Yeah.
Like I want to max corner.
So what did he say for reps?
No, he just says strength standards.
So I would always say just saying strength standards. Overhead press, I would always use a relative measure, and that's not.
Yeah, but then
you can't. That's not a linear relationship between.
Times body weight is a bit shit.
Yeah, because you always get the short guy that weighs.
Who can overpress like twice body weight almost.
Yeah,
whereas
like
the heavy guy.
The ant can lift like what?
Yeah, 80 times.
Yeah, that's my excuse. So, but you will always see relative strength standards decline as you go up in weight classes, which is why you've got Sarachev, who he was the bench world record holder.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that bench that happened at Boss of Bosses recently stood as like a new world record, but Sarachev's bench was just around 2 times body weight, if that.
Yeah.
So
a bunch of lightweight lifters.
Yeah, you've got 70 kilo lifters doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
So the strength standards for the big four, I would say military press would be body weight overhead. And then I'll do absolutes as well. So relatives. So military press, body weight overhead, bench minimum strength standard of 1.5 times body weight. Again, I've not achieved that.
You're putting it right now.
Yeah, I've not achieved that. Squat would be, I would say 2.5, and deadlift I would say 2.5.
Okay.
I think. So. Again, I've not achieved any of. Well, I've achieved military press, I think, but I've not done squat or deadlift 2.5. So it's between 2.5, and it depends on someone's proportions, what they're built to do, and also their height. Which again comes into proportion, anthropometry. Yeah. And then absolute strength standards, I believe, are military press, and this goes for. Let's take the average height male, average body weight. Yeah. So I don't even know what it is. Yeah. I would say think lifts that are impressive. 100 kilo military press.
Yeah.
100 kilo military press, 180 bench.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah, I think.
I think those are equivalent.
I think 140 bench is about your foot on the ladder. I think 180 bench is because most people you'll find their military press is really much less than their
bench.
Yeah, hugely. Especially if they're if they're a bencher that dips into military press.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Because they just and as well the way.
But most people who train for general aesthetics, I wouldn't say are very bench focused in training.
No.
They are somewhat, but
no,
they're not benching like 4 times a week.
So these are the standards that I think. Again, I'm talking from my perspective, like being 6'3", and you're 6'3" as well. So. Or we're talking continental 190. So I would say, let's carry on down that route. 180 bench, squat and deadlift. I'd say a minimum of 272, which is 600 pounds. I think
Jesus,
that's my.
For your height or for the average person?
For the average person.
Okay, fuck, that's
that absolute and what is the average? This is it. I can only talk from my perspective, really.
Yeah, because you've experienced them.
For me, the standards I'm going to hold myself to, and it's probably silly to put this out there, like if it's going out publicly, would be a 140 military press, a 227.5 bench, which is 500 pounds. And then, which is ridiculous because you just want to equate other people. You're just comparing yourself to other people.
For your height, it can be somewhat reasonable.
Yeah. And then deadlift and squat 320, which is 700. That would be what I'd think.
Yeah.
I can't talk from the perspective of the average height person because I'm just not average height. Yeah. So that was a very long-winded answer to that question.
No,
it's very difficult to say, and it's entirely dependent on the individual. Gym achievements, I think. Most people come into the gym and they want to bench 60 kilos, then they want to. It's bollocks. Like it's fine as long as you're progressing and you don't. If you loads of progressing secondary to your form remaining great and you're adding weight on the scale and you're staying lean, then that's great. And if you focus on powerlifting, which you know, when my focus shifts to powerlifting, the weight on the scale goes up drastically, and I sacrifice to win, bro.
Yeah.
I sacrifice everything to just get, you know,
bigger weights, maybe.
yeah, but inevitably my body weight goes up more than my total. So,
That's not very good. It's not what you
but
want.
that's why you take a longer term approach, and you know, make it more steady progress over time.
Yeah.
Which is why this style of training that you and I have adopted, you know, fairly recently is, you know, the past few years, is a better way of doing things, because it really reins you in, and you just progress steady. You can see steady progress over time. It's structured.
Yeah.
It's, you know, much better. And I'm obviously just talking about my West Side days. It's like.
So a question, because you mentioned you thought squatting and deadlifting should be pretty much the same.
Again, that's
Strength.
dependent on the lifter's proportions, and if you and if they're using a conventional or a sumo like stance on deadlift.
Really?
Yeah,
So you think sumo is easier than conventional?
depends on the person's proportions and how they're doing sumo. If they're doing it technically perfectly, then it's not an easy lift to do at all. It will be over time, but initially you'll see a lot of people when they convert to sumo, they end up compromising technique. Even if they got it drilled perfectly the first session, it will compromise just because mechanically they can just, you know, shift more weight.
Yeah, initially at least.
Yeah, initially like
Off
their
the
knees
floor,
will just
if you-
drift in, and they'll come off. You'll see them break the floor faster and faster and faster, and their weight.
Or if they're back rounding more and more and
Yeah,
more, because then it makes it easier.
Yeah.
So why do you think sumo's easier once you got technique down, if in the high weight classes, like maybe above 105, you pretty much always see the records being held by conventional pullers?
I don't know. Like, so, because most of those lifters probably shouldn't be pulling conventional, because they just can't get into a good enough position because of their guts.
So I wouldn't say it's necessarily easier. I'd say it's like some people do better with it because they have better circumstances.
I'm trying to think of an example of someone in a higher weight class who pulls sumo.
Yeah, there's like none.
There's none that spring to mind.
Dan Green, sort of. He's like a 220, 242.
Yeah, Dan Green.
Somewhat higher weight class.
He's a good sumo puller.
Yeah.
And then,
Pretty much it. That's what I like to remember.
yeah, there's no one that comes to mind. I would have thought. I mean, you see strongmen all the time. They can't pull sumo, can they? So they have like a really wide stance conventional
Yeah.
and wide grip conventional.
Yeah. Just so you can set up properly.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is once you get to a certain body weight, and again, it's not like this is just association. Like, it's not a given. Like, if someone really drilled their sumo technique and got up to like 300 pounds, they'd be a good sumo puller still.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, as people gain weight, they lose mobility. They lose,
Yeah.
you know, because they're compromising things. You know, I think that's why.
I feel like that mostly happens with people who bulk pretty aggressively.
Yeah.
Like if you're mostly getting.
Well, they just don't start with good form to begin with.
Yeah, also, but I feel like people who are above 20% body fat lose a lot more mobility than people who are like between 10 and 20
Yeah.
as they bulk up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's anecdotal, obviously, but
Yeah, I think, it's right. And most, like I said, most people don't start with a good technique on sumo, and I think it's cultural as well. Like a lot of the people who go up to a lot of people who go up to the higher weight classes, they don't want to pull sumo. They see it as like an inferior lift.
Yeah.
They want to just be like, they see all the strongmen pulling conventional.
Yeah.
They see all the biggest lifts that have gone before.
Yeah.
You know, they're all conventional. So.
Whereas with lighter weights people, I feel like it's more of a technique prowess.
Oh yeah,
like
bigger arches on bench,
Yeah, exactly.
better technique. You know,
You don't see big arches in heavyweights usually.
It's just again
Yeah,
because
they
it's
can't.
just they either can't because they've just developed that way,
Yeah.
and you've got to regress so much to remedy the issue. You know, it's like telling someone who's lateral raising 20 kilo dumbbells like for a quarter rep, like you probably use sixes for a bit,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, I'll never grow doing that.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, how are your shoulders feeling like doing that? They're like, oh yeah, they're not great, and I don't want to train my traps when I'm doing a lateral raise, or whatever. I think it's something that will change. There will be a big sumo puller, and there are, I'm sure, in the IPF, because it makes sense because of the guts and everything.
Yeah.
That's the reason I started to pull sumo in the warm-up room of British finals once.
What the fuck, man?
Because I had a lot of problems with conventional deadlift because I just couldn't get into position, and because I feel my hip anatomy is, I can't, with my feet narrow, I can't get enough hip flexion, and still keep my lumbar flat. Add to that the gut and the thighs compressing against one another,
really
makes it much worse.
I saw you pull like 270, was it?
I pulled 275
Yeah.
the first time I ever did sumo in competition, and I'd not deadlifted for years before that. I'd just squatted.
Yeah, it's proof of that.
Yeah, such is life. Which answers the question about what's the meaning.
What's the meaning of life?
Yeah, it's just fucked up. I think it makes sense for a lot of bigger lifters, and a lot of bigger lifters do in the IPF pull sumo. But yeah, we've answered that question today.
Yes. Right, next question. You're gonna love this.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of foam rolling? How does it help? And when is it best to do?
This is one for you. You start this one.
I'm not entirely sure. I've not looked into it too much, but from what I can tell, it helps with range of motion, but not necessarily much more so than just moving and performing the exercise itself. Especially, for example, eccentric exercise. So, for example, for deadlifting, you would go through a slightly longer range of motion than you would in the deadlift, and you would control the eccentric maybe a little bit more, so you can focus on getting range of motion in the right joints. So it can be a tool for increasing range of motion acutely, like before a session.
Yeah.
For example, benching, if you want a bigger arch, you can probably use it. But then it doesn't necessarily do a better job than moving around. And anecdotally, it can help some people relieve pain, like injuries, for example, tendonitis and stuff, rolling the quads. But yeah, besides that, I'm not sure there's much of a benefit. I would do it before training. I would still warm up. So for example, what I would do is I would warm up for benching, for example, do my first warm-up set, then roll for around 30-60 seconds, do my second set.
What would you roll? Your shoulders or your pecs?
It depends on what I'm trying to improve.
Yeah,
Thoracic. Yeah, for example, thoracic would be mainly my erectors.
Yeah.
So that would be from my lower back to basically my neck. And if, for example, I was struggling to, let's say, get my knees out on sumo, I would probably roll my adductors and potentially, if I lack ankle range of motion, my calves.
Yeah.
But I often just see people doing it for 40 minutes before a session and not even being warm when they get to actually lifting.
Yeah.
And that's putting.
Yeah, I've been guilty of that. I've done it for. I've warmed. It used to be a joke. I used to be a joke that I warmed up for like 45 minutes before a session. As in, like I just spend like tons of time rolling, because it does make you feel better. No one can deny that. And everyone knows the first.
Placebo, but you know.
Well, the first time they foam roll or whatever, you know, I think I can't remember who said this recently, but they looked at the progression of like how foam rollers, when they were first brought to market, they were like this really low density foam that just you'd see them like after a week they'd just be destroyed in a gym, but they'd still supposedly like give people like huge results, like huge relief from pain or tightness or whatever. And then it progressed to more dense foam, and then you've got the plastic ones covered in, like the trigger point ones covered in foam, and then you've got like people using bits of sewer pipe, which is what I've been using, and like, you know, lacrosse balls, and then you've got Kelly Starrett and all that, and it's progressed and progressed. Yeah. And I remember the first time I used a roller, it's incredibly painful. And I just incredibly painful.
You're not like
on quads, on like IT band, on, you know, it was like unbearably so, like deep breathing.
So
like,
you thought it was working?
Well, no, this is the thing that would subside, and it was like a neurological. I guess like what I understand now. I don't even know if I'm saying this right, but like a neurological sort of inhibition of that. Yeah. Any like tone, is that right? Like tension in the muscle.
Yeah.
And it I don't know. It just seemed to relieve. You could if you've got tension that you feel in a certain portion
Yeah, and it's restricting your range
of a lift, or you feel like tightness in your groin at the bottom of the squat, or you feel like it's a restriction in your movement.
Yeah.
You can moving's all well and good, but it's a global like strategy to you improving just that movement. If you want to target a specific area during your warm up, then you get on a lacrosse ball in between your warm up sets. I think this, the thing that was the big sort of change in mobility work was supple leopard and Kelly Starrett. And
I've
before
got a friend who has the book.
yeah, I've got the book. And
Really?
I bought the first edition. I pre-ordered it, and I've all but skim read it really.
Yeah.
I still think it's a good thing, and I think you get people that get really hyped up about things, and you get people that really like poo-poo
Skeptic.
these ideas, and that they don't really like to just take what's take what's good and reject
leave
what's
the rest. Yeah.
because if it feels good, then surely it's a good. Obviously there's limits to that.
Yeah.
Such as like heroin addiction, but
Great example.
yeah. But what was I saying? So with the change in attitudes towards it with the supple leopard, the idea was before that was to do there was a YouTube channel where you did 10 minutes a day of like a specific problem areas, or they gave you like a WOD for that day, like you would in CrossFit.
Yeah.
And that's good because it gets people doing things consistently, and there will be some residual benefit from doing that. Even if I think the first one of the series was like sitting in a squat for 10 minutes, which again, it's horrible, but it has.
It helps.
Yeah, it has some like lasting effects. I remember asking this lad that we used to train with years ago, like how he had such a good squat, and he used to say like he just used to sit in a squat while he brushed his teeth every day, like in the morning and in the evening.
It's actually not.
And I think you've got to be either extreme. So with the self myofascial release stuff, or the foam rolling, you're either using it acutely before you train, or you're doing it fairly chronically, like little bits throughout the day.
See, I haven't seen research on chronic effects of foam rolling.
And I'm talking just anecdotally, but yeah, we know from what I have understood, the research doesn't say much about it in doing much of anything for beyond just general movement.
Yeah.
But then static stretching is poo-pooed a lot of the time, and I still think that's of benefit when it's applied at the right times. Yeah. But I wouldn't sit. I still can't understand people like the weightlifters just sitting there, or lying there for hours after their session, or for like an isolated session.
Or just coming in to stretch.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of people on.
If you're a gymnast and you're training multiple times a day and you're stretching and you need that, you're reinforcing it every morning, afternoon, evening. But if you're just doing it like once a day, there's no need. And like I think it was Max Aita said when he trained with this Bulgarian method. I know it's not a direct example, but if you're squatting or you're doing the lifts multiple times a day, every day, you just
your range of motion.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just there,
Yeah.
And the other thing is the reason I used to have to use it was people use it, say if their elbows are hurting and they work on their triceps a bit, and it relieves that tension.
Yeah.
But the real reason the tension's there is because you're just not training properly.
Yeah, you're
just programming
too much volume, too much intensity.
Yeah.
Not recovering enough, etc.
Yeah. Another long-winded answer.
Or technique. I remember one of these studies being reviewed in Mass.
Yeah.
Which I actually bought a lifetime access to when I was in first year, so not sponsored, but
Yeah. So.
But basically, they just found that you didn't need to foam roll for much more than 30-60 seconds between sets of warm-ups.
Yeah.
Like, based on the literature, that was what came out of it. And pain didn't need to be very high, like as in the pressure applied.
Yeah.
Maybe a 2 to 4 out of 10, something like that. And you would still see robust changes in range of motion.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't see extra changes in range of motion by doing like minutes and minutes, or by doing extra pain or pressure applied.
No.
Like just a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah.
So.
And just to call out James Hoffman.
Okay.
It is in his recent talk on recovery like
in the seminar?
Yeah, the seminar. Yeah. We talked about rolling and
placebo
massage, and how it all is around like compassionate touch.
Oh,
I think that was it.
Yes.
And in the literature, it's just a funny
it's coined
as compassionate touch.
I feel recovered.
Yeah. And then having skimmed through his Instagram, he was saying that he'd had a few issues with his I think lower back or his hips.
Yeah.
And he was saying that this I think it was some sort of glorified lacrosse ball or massage ball, like having worked on his glutes with that beforehand or even throughout the day was giving him a lot of relief. And that's the thing. I know, given the situation I'm in now, having fallen down the stairs about a week ago, and fallen on my SI joint on the side that I've injured previously, I know that when I come back to training, to alleviate some of that tension that will have set in, that protective tension, I will certainly roll my glutes and stuff just to take away some of that tension before I do any lower body work. That'll be residual, and that'll be a way of just giving myself a bit more confidence to move better before returning to training.
I would say something that's overlooked is when you have chronic injury,
Yeah.
and you've already taken steps to reduce pain, like for example reducing frequency, reducing volume, for the movements that hurt it.
Yeah.
Getting some acute pain relief
Yeah.
can be useful to still keep training at
Oh
least
yeah.
a little bit.
Hugely.
So
That's the point I was making with the James Hoffman example, is that even though he says, in the literature it's like there's not, if it feels good, obviously not acutely sitting on a lacrosse ball or whatever, if it feels good, then you it's not going to harm you, then why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
Like, if it makes you feel like you can move better, if it's placebo, fine, but placebo is very strong.
Yeah.
Like if it has a knock-on effect onto something else, it's still a good thing.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
yeah.
Sweet. Next question. Ooh. If you were building an ideal split,
Yeah.
what would it look like?
For what?
That's the whole question.
So an ideal split for, depends what for, and I would
Let's go muscle growth first. It's a silly question.
Yeah, it's a very ambiguous question. Like,
It's just a very entry level question.
no, it's
Without disrespect.
well, who asked it?
Some guy on Instagram. Anyways,
I would say 6 days a week. I would say
that's not what a split is. A split is what body parts are you training?
Yeah. But I'm saying this is the start. I'd say training 6 days a week, and I would say training like a. I mean, not to hype RP or anything, but like
Sponsor me, please.
Sponsor it. Was I'd say I think you're just off camera a bit there.
Am I?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So I would say a quad dominant lower day, a glute dominant lower day. You're looking at planes of motion really, or planes you're working in. So you got a knee flexion, knee extension dominant day, hip extension dominant day. Yeah. Sorry, a knee extension dominant day, a hip extension dominant day. You've got a horizontal pressing or chest dominant day, horizontal pulling dominant, vertical pulling dominant, and then vertical pressing dominant day. And
That's 7 days, right?
that's 6. 4 for upper body, 2 for lower body.
Okay.
Glutes, quads.
So basically,
And then you've got two vertical for upper, 2 vertical for.
basically push
two
pull legs, but with an emphasis on certain.
Yeah, and then you can sprinkle additional volume like wherever you want. Like you put your triceps on the vertical pushing day as it is with the RP template, or with the and then you can put some vertical. You can put some triceps on your chest day after chest as well.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say for and then you that would be like a base frequency, I think. And so within that, you'd have your dominant chest day, but on your vertical pressing day, you're going to train a bit of chest as well.
Just say what you mean by dominant. I mean more volume towards.
Yeah, more volume towards it. And I think from that you could then, as you might need more volume, that would mean you were doing too many sets within one session. You could split those or add additional sessions in the next few mesocycles, couldn't you? Which I think is what you've done.
You mean increased frequency?
Yeah, you could increase the frequency of training, but you'd split your volume over sessions to make them more manageable. Because as I found out, doing that glute dominant low, the exercises you choose are important as well. Because that can last, the session can last like nearly 4 hours at the end of the mesocycle for me, which I don't, and that was, from what I can recall, that was reverse lunges of some sort, whether that was barbell or safety squat bar, sumo.
How many sets?
I've gone for like 8 on everything. Sumo squats, either belt or barbell. In fact, it might be glute bridges. Either way, it was just a lot.
A lot of fucking volume,
a lot to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I think there's merit to, if you have, certainly more difficult for lower body, but for example, if you are if you go to a power rack, you might do a high bar squat and then a Romanian deadlift, and then maybe it's not an optimal exercise order, but you might do your hanging leg raises because you've got the rack, and then you go and do leg press afterwards because it's just efficient time wise to get it in. And how much difference really is doing hanging knee raises or leg raises going to be to doing your leg press or leg extensions afterwards? You're working, you are working your hip flexors still, in a way, your rec fem. So
part of the quad.
And then for strength, I don't know, I'd say a 4-day a week is a base split. The only reason I'd say
like 5.
I'd stick with 4 purely because of West Side. And
did West Side do only 4 ever?
4 was it was like a dynamic effort, upper dynamic effort, lower,
you're right,
upper max effort, lower max effort. And the
crew or PM crew?
Well, I would say
PM.
PMs, the literature supports it. But I'd say 4 days a week. The only reason I say 6 days a week for hypertrophy is because
more volume.
You need to do more volume, so it just makes it more manageable to split it. And I just feel you need that little bit extra recovery mentally if you're doing hard strength training sessions, just because you're working at a higher intensity anyway. So even though I'm still unclear on like the proper definition of what fatigue is and how the context of it. Obviously people say volume is more fatigue than intensity, but I don't think anyone's going to argue if they do a max effort bench session or they do
intensity is definitely contributing to fatigue. Is the big one.
But I'm saying how it's perceived. So when fatigue is in, you might get
detriment to performance.
Or inflammation in joints.
Yeah, you could. That's like the in the muscle sort of fatigue.
I'm saying perception, how you feel after like a 1 rep max. Again, I'm going to get crucified for this because I don't really like.
Go on. You're already fucked, man.
Well, is
call that James Hoffman.
No, I just said like he's contradicted himself because he's presented like one thing and then he's saying like, I like sitting on a ball. So
said you weren't at West Side anymore.
Well,
you're just dead now.
Huh?
You're just dead to everyone.
Well, right, fine. What the fuck? What were we even saying?
Best splits. That's it. Just best split.
4 days a week for upper lower, and then for hypertrophy I'd say like a knee extension dominant and then hip extension dominant day, so 2 days for lower, and then you've got 4 upper body days working in different planes, so horizontal push, horizontal pull, vertical push, vertical pull, and then you sprinkle your additional volume where you need it to be. And then as that progresses and you need more volume on certain things, you can do double sessions or split those sessions, AM, PM, whatever.
I agree, but I do feel like, at least in my experience, most people can do more total volume across a week and still recover with higher frequencies. And since volume is the main thing for hypertrophy, I would mostly go towards slightly higher frequencies, like even on average. I'm not entirely convinced you need to back off from high frequencies. Like let's say you do 3 to 4 times a week for most muscle groups. I'm not sure that's unsustainable, and I think that most people can do most volume across a week for each muscle group with frequencies of between 3 and 5, maybe even 6. And so I would typically stick to that for muscle growth. Now for strength it's a bit different because since you're doing pretty intense work, that can, at least in my experience, wear on your joints a lot more, and beyond just muscular recovery, having recovery for your joints does tend to take longer, and so I wouldn't train my glutes 5 times a week because deadlifting is pretty hard on my knees, back,
to recover from it.
Exactly. And so for strength, for example, I would more so stick to maybe For bench, up to like 4 or 5 times a week at most. And for squatting and deadlifting, squatting more so maybe 2 to 4.
What would you say, 4 to 5 times a week for bench?
Up to 4 or 5. Yeah. That's like variations included. So that's like comp bench, tempo bench.
Shout out Ash Patel for that whistle, by the way. Sorry, carry on.
Comp bench, tempo bench, etc. For squatting, I'd say between 1 and 4 times a week.
Yeah.
One time if you're really just fucking banged up, or you're unable to recover from anything more. And for deadlifting, I'd say between 1 and 3 times. 3 times for like the very technique proficient sumo pros, for example, who don't get too much fatigue and their damage to their joints when they pull.
Yeah, so
they can get away with a bit more.
I agree. I agree with that. I know that in a recent podcast that was between Mike and was it Israel and Jordan Peters.
Yeah, not that recent anymore. It's like
no, not that recent.
3 months old.
Yeah, but relatively.
Yeah.
That Mike was giving Jordan some credit for, okay, so joints aren't going to feel as bad because, well, you're not going to get as many joint issues because you're working at lower volumes with a variety of movements.
Yeah.
Because repetition is just even if it performs perfect, just the load and the repetition and everything else will degrade joint surfaces, I think, over time. And my understanding was
they also adapt, obviously, but if you do overdo volume, for example, you might run into issues.
The issue, I think, with powerlifting and joint issues, just from what I'm recalling of what you said, is because movements are so specific and like if you're doing that benching 4 times a week and your low bar squatting and your shoulders are taking a hammering, your elbows are taking a hammering, and it's just the same movement over and over at such a high intensity, and the majority of the time, as a consequence of that intensity being high, or people overshooting their RPEs or whatever, they will let their form slide, and they just, they end up with chronic joint issues, chronic tendonitis, and there was some other point I was going to make, but I can't recall.
That's why I'd say far out from a comp, you should make sure to have plenty of variation.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get to 2 months before comp, and doing comp bench fucks up your shoulders already.
People do it a year out, though, don't they? They just comp bench all the time.
Yeah, which is like not the best idea usually.
No, it limits you because you can only do so much volume on that.
Get more specific so much more than you already are.
But the argument I was going to make about you saying the frequency at which you train should be like as high as you can tolerate constantly.
Sustainable, yeah.
In my opinion, and from my understanding of, again, shout out Israel, is that should be cyclical, just like you would. Just like in a mesocycle, you would ramp volume, and then you would deload and ramp up volume and deload. And you've got your two in the RP templates, for example, from a hypertrophy aim. You'd ramp your volume for a hypertrophy mesocycle, as rapidly as you can, like adding 2 sets a week if you can. Deload and then again, and then deload, and then you do a metabolite mesocycle, deload. And then you would metabolite focused anyway, and then you would do a resensitization, which is effectively like a slower volume progression, or even I would even say do a strength phase. So don't you just keep your volume steady and just try and like add load. Yours will stop recording now.
Woo! Go on, just keep talking.
Yeah, I'm going to wait for your return. It seems impolite.
It's okay. We're back.
Yeah. Woo. Okay, so like that, you want to resensitize to that volume stimulus, and if you can maintain your form and up the load that you can use on certain movements, and then potentiate that with more. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it. Potentiate it with more with the volume stimulus. Yeah. You can not even necessarily reps, just because you're still going to get stronger in that rep range with the reduced volume. And then you go into a volume phase and you start adding volume with that given strength level, which is going to increase anyway as a consequence of the hypertrophy taking place. And yes, I know I probably say hypertrophy wrong. Hypertrophy, muscle size, muscle, etc.
Jackness.
Jackness, yeah. I think that needs to be cyclical as well.
Yeah.
So you need to that model needs to go up into the, again, is it macro cycle, is it the year plan, is it whatever,
Yeah.
And you need to take the same approach. I think Mike has done this as well, because we both love Mike, about having like a phase of lower volume and then ramping the volume over time. And I certainly know, contrary to what most people seem to think they need to do in dieting phases, Mike has like added volume throughout a dieting phase to obviously burning more calories. But I'm sure I've read
Mainly
him say,
just maintaining muscle.
yeah, he said you need more volume to maintain muscle
Yeah.
mass as you go further into a deficit,
Yeah.
which is totally the opposite to what you see a lot of other people will say.
Really?
Yeah, they seem to want to reduce the volume, keep the volume as low as possible, and keep the intensity as high as possible.
Yeah,
and
that's-
they use an indication of them losing muscle as if the intensity, if their
Sure.
load's going down,
Yeah.
then they're losing muscle apparently.
So you need more intensity.
But
Three
yeah.
triples only.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And yet you hear Mike say, I don't know, I don't fully understand the reasoning for this, but that you need more volume as you progress into a diet phase to maintain muscle mass.
Yeah, because cutting is a catabolic stimulus,
Yeah.
so to speak.
And volume's anabolic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you sort of counterbalance it to maintain it.
Yeah, but again, that logic seems to evade most people. And they're very successful, like in physique, which I am not.
I think their definition of low volume might be a bit off.
Oh, they do like the loading set and the back off set, which is I think a Scott Stevenson thing. And Scott's obviously got a good rationale for doing that.
I don't like top sets.
Yeah, like they do a top set and then they do their back off set and they just have two different rep ranges, and then they move on and they have like their metabolite work, which is a combination. I know Scott was Jordan's coach for a bit, and Jordan's approach is somewhat heavily influenced, by Scott, and Scott's got a very scientific approach to how he does things in his books, which I've not read. The new one, How to Be Your Own Body, I think it's How to Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach, but I do have a copy. Yeah.
Shout out MNU, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, MNU. Great. Legit, great course. Seriously.
Anyways, back to question.
Yeah.
Ideal split. I'm not sure I agree with having periodized frequency. In practice, I haven't had many issues, and I haven't had, like, obviously I'm coaching a certain level of people. I'm not coaching like the strongest people on the planet, and I'm not the strongest person ever either. But I'd say for the vast majority of people, you can get away with pretty high frequencies pretty consistently. Like, obviously, still need deloads.
Oh yeah, as a beginner, you can do whatever. Like,
not even beginners, even intermediates, I'd say.
Yeah.
And advanced people, obviously, it's a bit more complicated, but I think
I
most
don't
people
think
underestimate it.
we have any just by virtue of being at a university, we don't have any advanced people. The most advanced person you're going to get, and he won't listen to reason. Well, he will, but he won't change his ways. Is someone with the initials RE, who might be my manager. Which he can acknowledge that these.
Well, he is pretty advanced, I'd say.
Yeah.
Like,
He's clearly done what works, but. Yeah, it's a psychological thing. Like, people want to. They've been told they come from the Dorian Yates school, which I really rate Dorian Yates.
so many shout outs.
Yeah. But I really rate Dorian Yates. But at the same time, like, and he's clearly very successful, hasn't he? But if you didn't know, but he acknowledges himself, like, been training too intensely near competition, and his career was like, I think it was half the length of.
Most people
Was it
have.
Haney's? I don't know.
Yeah.
It was like
Haney had a long
his
career.
competitive career was very short, and it was he tore a tricep, tore a bicep, and that cumulative stress. Haney was, I think, more of a volume guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coleman was more of a volume guy, as far as I can tell.
Coleman was more of I want to just injure myself guy. Like, but again,
He did a lot of volume, to be fair.
yeah, but Coleman apparently did the same sessions for years and years and years and years.
You need to be able to track it consistently, bro.
Yeah,
Overload
yeah.
is key.
Yeah, overload is key.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing. What overload? This is another term that needs to be clarified in the. We're going all over the place here.
Yes, this is great.
Overload, like overload. Most people interpret from the Dorian Yates, the Scott
Wait.
Stevenson school of thought. Overload is literally, can I add more load to the bar? Like it's not. They don't think of it as, can I add a set? Can I reduce my rest periods? Can I,
Yeah.
you know, it's, or can I add more frequency? Reps, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're always on the cusp of recover, a bit like of being able to recover. So that they're always like to failure every session.
Yeah.
They don't incorporate deloads of people that I'm aware of that incorporate it. Yeah, there's some really high level people that do it, but it's most of it's up here. Like it's all psychology. That's why you've got people that train less than optimally according to the literature, and they're to failure all the time. And yet they're thriving on it. Yeah, they've got a few niggles. Yeah, they've got a few aches and pains they deal with occasionally. They go for a massage. They maybe order some peptides to give to their rats, which of course is totally legal in this country, and we're not going to include that in the video.
Are we?
But no, they do that, and they get you know, they're able to still train. But the fact that it's a cliche, and it's like, but it's all psychological. A lot of it is psychological. You've got to do what you want to do, and if people thrive on like going
Lower volume,
balls to the wall
intensity.
all the time,
Yeah.
because that's what they love, then great. But they will reach a point where that fucks them in the ass dry. Sorry
See,
to put it like that.
In the research, you still see pretty consistent gains from lower volumes as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not viable.
It's just less than optimal.
Yeah.
It's still
Still good.
incredibly potent stimulus, but you've got to weigh up the cost benefit.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and
If you have a limited
again,
time.
who am I to tell you this?
Yes.
I'm not jacked. I'm just
What do you mean
heavy.
you're not jacked?
I'm just heavy.
Back off. Squatted what? 320 in reps?
No, I've squatted 300 in single ply and reps. The first time I ever.
And 280 raw.
Huh?
280 raw?
285 raw. Yeah.
Back off. I'm gonna check next question. Are you flexing again?
I'm trying to do gang signs. This says blood.
Blood.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Bloods and Crips.
Okay, next question. How beneficial would it be to bring my rest times down from 7 to 9 minutes to 3 to 5 for powerlifting?
I would. You start. It's like you're interviewing me. This. It's like you're interviewing me.
Well, yeah.
This is a two-way thing.
Okay.
Look, we can each have a pen. You have a red pen. I'll have a green pen. Not that we use
Red
it.
is better anyways.
We've got a whiteboard.
Yes.
We might use it.
That is true.
We're not scared to use it.
I'm not sure it would help at all. Like, it might, but it depends on whether or not you're ready for a new set. Like, if you just did a set of 10, well, not 10, let's say 5 on deadlifts, and it was to failure, you probably won't be ready to perform again in 3 to 5 minutes. Like, at least perform pretty well and present an overloading stimulus. And so it might just be better to keep to 7 to 9 minutes. I would mostly auto-regulate it. Obviously, time constraints play into it. If you can only train for an hour a session and you have 20 sets, you might want to make sure you time your rest periods. But if you don't have time constraints, just auto-regulate it. When you're ready to do a new set, that's pretty close in performance. This is for strength. If you're ready to do a new set with performance that's pretty close to your previous set, I would say you're ready to go. You want to make sure breathing is roughly back to normal, because especially for powerlifting, not even especially for powerlifting, but just for powerlifting, you don't want your breathing to be the limiting factor, which it probably won't be unless your work capacity is absolute trash. But yeah, just rest enough to have recovered most of your performance and go again. If you rest for more than 5 minutes for bench, for example, oftentimes I'm not sure, unless you're super strong, oftentimes I'm not sure that's a very good idea, just because it's not very efficient. But for squatting and deadlifting, it might make more sense. That's how I see it.
Yeah. So it's from a powerlifting perspective.
Yeah, for powerlifting.
Depending on what phase you're in of like a powerlifting site, like what you're doing. If you're in a hypertrophy phase for powerlifting, I would probably keep it at. I would try and minimise your rest periods as much as possible. I would try and keep it 2 to 3 minutes on.
I wouldn't time it.
Well, I think most people should time it, even if they don't fully adhere to that time, and at least it gives them an awareness of how how long they're taking, and that's why I set a timer in between sets. But because I think most people just fuck off and chat and play with their music and go on Instagram or go on fucking Facebook or whatever, and it's much easier to gauge how long you should be allowed for rest if you've got a measurement of, like, you know, if you're timing yourself between sets. The other thing is, even if I standardise that time and said 2 minutes between, and I know this isn't powerlifting, but if I said I'm standardising my rest periods as 2 minutes between squats and 2 minutes between curls. Now, by virtue of the exercise, curls I'm not going to take as long to set up on a curl. Yeah. Where if I set a 2 minute timer on a squat,
you go flat.
No, because I do that anyway. Like, I would do that, and I know I'm not the most successful.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, because what I do.
Really?
You're not on a maximum. Not. This is just taking.
Okay.
This is on like a set of 8, which is probably more taxing, you know, breathing wise. So if I finish a set of squats, say I've got a belt on, and let's just say for argument's sake I've got wrist wraps on.
Yeah, it takes you a while to set up.
Yeah, so I've finished. I've racked the bar. I've stepped away. I'm like catching my breath. I take my wrist wraps off, hang them on the bar. I take my belt off, which I might have to lean on the rack to do because it's a single prong belt to take off the bar. 30 seconds has elapsed. I've then got to walk over, maybe I'm timing it on my phone or something. I've got to start the timer. That's like 45 seconds because I walk really slowly. Maybe I record the weights down first, because it's just a routine you get. You know, if you're in that routine of training, I know it's not how everyone wants to train. It's how I like to train. And I don't really chat.
How everyone's trading.
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah. So you write your session down, because I like writing it down in a book, and then I start my timer. Whereas on a set of curls, I might, as soon as I put that dumbbell down, bang, the timer's on, and it's so. Reality is, I'm probably taking 3.5 minutes, maybe even 4 minutes between sets.
Curls for powerlifting?
No, because I'm using that as an example. You know, the nature of the exercise will dictate how long your actual rest period is. Because when you're setting up for a squat versus when you're setting up for a curl, you're putting your belt, your timer's gone off, and only then should you start putting your belt on. You start putting your wrist wraps on, maybe. You know, maybe I don't know what people use sleeves and knee wraps, whatever. Like, knee wraps are going to take forever anyway, and they're going to tax you to put on.
They just walk the bar like this.
Like if you're putting your own knee wraps on, you're fucked anyway. Like, you know, you're going to be taxed. It's like supersetting a forearm exercise with the squat. If you've got like somebody else to put them on for you, and then you've got to roll them afterwards. So if you haven't got a wrap roller or anything, but that applies to very few people, doesn't it? Yeah. So by nature of the exercise, you will take a longer rest period. Whereas like a curl or whatever, you would take a much shorter rest period, or face pull, whatever, you would take a shorter rest period. So that's how I would do it. Standardise a time, and then you just
adjust it.
Yeah, you just add what you need to add in, and then as you get closer to competition, if you're a powerlifter, you'd basically, you can either lengthen those rest periods if you feel appropriate, but still standardise them to like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever. So you've got a timer. And then if that doesn't fit your personality, you want to just fuck off in between sets and chat to people, because that calms you down. And you can remove yourself from the anxiety of having to perform. Then do that. But you've got to, I think, have a standard that you can. You know, you've got to have a baseline to move away from and try different things, haven't you? So I don't know whether that was a good answer.
No, I agree. To sort of simplify it, what I would do for hypertrophy is just wait for long enough for your breathing to get back to normal. Because then you're pretty much ready for your muscles to be the limiting factor, and thus for them to be trained the hardest. Yeah. And for powerlifting, I just wait long enough to get your performance roughly back to where it was for your last set.
The only reason I like a timer for the hypertrophy
is for mindfulness, sort of being mindful of.
Well, yeah, but mindful, but also you've got if you're increasing your volume, you're going to be in the gym for so long anyway.
Yeah.
If you just go and chat to your mate for five minutes, it turns into 10 minutes.
Every set, that's like.
Yeah, you're going to be there for hours. If you're a student, if you work for yourself, which I'm not. Yeah, like if you've got no other commitments, that's fine. But if most people that I've tried to employ that model of like of increasing volume with. I know that wasn't the question because it's powerlifting, but
increasing
they just can't
time wise.
Yeah, they just can't be unless they time their rest periods. They just can't do it because most people won't.
They start with like 40-minute sections and end with 3-hour sessions.
Yeah, you've got the gym talker that's like chasing. There was a meme that was posted a while ago where it's like this woman like swimming away in a life jacket and a dolphin chasing her, and it was like gym talkers like trying to bother me what happens or whatever. Anyway, you've got people that do that will just come up to you and just start conversations, and it's great and it's good to be social and all that, but it just doesn't fit with having to do that much work. Yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah. Views on pause movements, squats, bench deadlifts.
For
views on pause movements. Okay.
Yeah, you've got side view, you've got rear view,
front
anterior view. Yeah,
rear
the
view?
Other side view. We said rear view. You've got top down view.
Bottom up.
Yeah, that's a weird one. Especially on a squat, you're like under somebody, and like especially if they're pausing, you're just looking up and they're just teabagging.
Checking depth.
Yeah. It's always getting to wear like tight-fitting underwear. But I think pause movements, like pause squats, pause.
This is the last question, by the way.
Okay, last question. Cool, we'll make it last a while.
Pause movements.
Views. Pause movements.
Squats, bench dead.
Yeah, not literal views. So great for technique. Great for establishing depth.
Strength and hypertrophy.
Yeah, for strength, for establishing technique and for ingraining good technique. They're fantastic. And I'm talking about paused in the context of a bench and a squat, not paused mid-range like on a deadlift. Or
you could also.
You can, but I'll say that in a minute. Like, what I would say is you're paused on like a squat is the best thing for getting comfortable in that bottom position, for getting to depth, for
learning to use rebound to an extent as well.
Yeah, and I think. And I'm going to bring this thing I've brought up before about on a in a powerlifting comp, you pause a bench, you're given a down signal on your deadlift. Why don't you pause? Why don't you get an up signal on your squat? Because you just want to exploit that stretch reflex or knee wraps or whatever. You know. Oh well.
Pausing a squat would be a piece of shit though.
Hey.
Pausing a squat, like actually having the bar not move,
would be horrible.
That would be actually pretty hard.
Yeah, it's horrible. That's when the lifts would all go down, and yeah. But it would save a lot of hoo-ha around. Oh, was it depth? Was it not depth? Yeah. Was it?
Or you can just fucking record the thing and then watch it again if there's like disagreement.
Anyway, so pausing, great, good for especially on things like on technique, and it's just a constraint to stop you from overshooting. RPEs,
sort of,
I think.
And
if you're on an RPE-based system, pausing on a hypertrophy-based.
No, I mean during the lift.
Oh, during the lift. Again, to establish good technique, but on a concentric, like, what's the value? Yeah.
Just focusing on.
Yeah, what's the value? I mean, like if you mid-range pause in a sumo deadlift.
So improve positioning and improve strength at certain joint angles.
Yeah. So I would use it between like. So I would use it in like a transition between a hypertrophy phase and a strength, pure powerlifting phase.
You wouldn't do it right before me.
No,
because that's just silly.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to do it anywhere near a meet. But when you're trying to improve technique on a certain lift, then there's a benefit. Like,
or also just strength in certain positions.
Yeah.
Like for example, for my deadlift, I fell off the floor.
Yeah.
So if I want to increase strength off the floor, I might as well just do a positive floor.
But the reality of it, though, when it's employed by most people, is they inevitably will not lower the weight enough. Compared to their competition lift, and just lose all benefit of doing the exercise.
Yeah.
How it's intended to be done, because they think. I mean, I encountered this with someone doing a Larsen press in the gym the other day, which I've never done a Larsen press, but my understanding of it is you're just basically holding a really strong arch, you're lifting your legs off the floor, and this person also had the prescription of doing like a 5-second eccentric, which to most people will turn into a 5-count eccentric, which in reality will turn into like
2-second eccentric.
2-second eccentric, which I think this is where things get lost. Like this is why the efficacy of things gets debated, is because people don't do them as prescribed, and this is why I'll go off on tangents like this all the time, but this is why I'm a huge fan of Shiko, because Shiko puts so much. We talked about the average intensity in a Shiko
program, it's like 75 most,
and the huge
70.
volume you do. But yeah, Shiko lifters are the most consistent, and like even I think Sarachev was a Shiko lifter.
Belkin was, right? I think
Belkin was. Belkin was. Milanichev was a Shiko.
Yeah.
I think just by anyone who's Russian is a Shiko lifter. Yeah.
One thing. Yeah, there we go. Pausing during the lift can also be useful to serve as a technique day and reduce loading. So for example, if you can only squat heavy once a week because your knees are fucked, then getting one technique day where you pause, for example, let's say at parallel, for 2 seconds can reduce loading but still allow you to train that pattern. Yeah. So I think that's a pretty good use of it for powerlifting.
For hypertrophy, I think it's good in the context of like a bench press or like pressing, because, or any sort of pressing, because you're in a much, by putting that constraint of a pause in place, you're having to limit the load you can use. You're having to better your technique. Probably will better your technique as a consequence of it, but it just puts you like in a safe position with things like avoiding pec tears, things like that. If you're having to pause and you've got a cue of the contact of a dumbbell with your shoulder or the bar with your chest, and you're not pausing for like, you see people like pausing squats for like 10 seconds, like what's the point? Great.
There's literally no point to that.
Great, you're better at pause squats than everyone else because you can sit in the hole with 400 pounds, like great.
What about
or even like pull downs. If you say I'm going to do pull downs paused, your load's going to be limited, a shed load.
It is a way of ensuring you're getting proper range of motion, because you literally see yourself pausing and like, okay, I'm here. One thing I wanted to ask you about was pausing benches during a powerlifting phase, like as in sort of during the transition between hypertrophy and powerlifting. When would you start pausing bench? Like
as soon as your intention is to compete in a
meet,
powerlifting
somewhat
meet.
too. But how far out for a meet would you start? And how strictly would you enforce comp standard pauses on every set?
So realistically, I wouldn't touch and go. I would increase the emphasis on a pause. So I would still consciously pause to some extent, or stop. Basically, don't let the bar contact my chest hard or contact the body hard, because I think it's important that you have control over it. So either
soft pause.
Yeah, soft pause. So basically, just above or on your chest.
Yeah.
Don't get a rebound off your chest. So don't.
You can if you're good at it, but
most people. So people who are just gifted to be a good bencher anyway. Yeah. They've got big arch, big chest, short arms, big arse, which is something else we'll come on to with good benching. Then they'll they can get away with it, but for most people, I think it's important that they have control over the bar, and there's a degree of pause at the chest from as soon as they intend to have the bench press as like a strength focus or go into a power lift, and then as you reduce reps,
I'd say as soon as you're doing like 5 or less reps,
because that's the thing is it's such a taxing thing to do. Like to pause.
Like pausing to comp standard isn't.
But that's why you should do it. Like people don't want to do it because
it's hard. And it reduces loads and like
reduces loads, and their strength goes down when they're trying to get their strength to go up. But at the same time, it's on any lifts like that are done, like any of the power lifts that are done for repetition. And that's why I loathe AMRAP sets, is because positioning is worse every subsequent rep, and you put yourself, you're in a fatigue state, you're in a compromised position, and you're at far more risk of injury as a consequence of that, which is why West side is the best side, because you're only ever doing like 1 to 3 reps.
No, you're also doing like accessories, right?
Yeah, you're doing, but they're just like
reps.
single joint, like nothing important. So yeah,
It's like trying to max out specificity on one end, and then like going complete other end.
what's more specific than a max?
Yeah, but then what's less specific than 15 reps on micros?
Yeah, but it's still,
It's a bit of a,
yeah, still the best side.
best side. All right,
That's it. Yeah,
that's it.
cool.
That concludes the first episode of.
Well, no, we haven't got a name.
We haven't got a name.
We haven't got a name yet.
He's got like 20 names down, but
Yeah, it'll be a surprise.
yes.
We'll see what we call it.
We should be doing this every week or 2 weeks.
I think every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good day. Like, so more Jack than this one. Big on this one. Sweet. Yes.
Fuck that, that's in the way.
See, I got the angle on this one, so there's no. Fucking Lee Priest over here.
Yeah, exactly.
He's sweating already.
Yeah, I'm sweating just from being alive.
Lighting is actually pretty good here, I'm not gonna lie. Oh, I'm saying, bro. Like, look at that, man.
I'm just hobbling back to my chair. What?
It's looking beefy.
Yeah.
Also, the angle makes it look like my arm is like 3 times your body.
It is.
Which is fucking great.
I need to turn this way.
This one makes me look.
Anyway, yeah, don't put any of this video of me struggling to move because no one's going to listen to me.